In 1984, at Wembley Stadium, the screams of 5-year-old Lucy, lost among 80,000 people, were enough to stop rock history's biggest star in his tracks. Because that night, Freddie Mercury didn't just save a child, he discovered the true power of music, and this discovery changed him forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you're about to discover will show you why Freddie Mercury wasn't just a performer, but someone who understood that the most important moments happen when the music stops and humanity takes center stage. August 5, 1984, Wembley Stadium, London. In a sea of 80,000 screaming Queen fans, 5-year-old Lucy Thompson was having the worst day of her young life. What should have been the most exciting experience imaginable, her first rock concert, had become a nightmare of crushing crowds, deafening noise, and the terrifying realization that she was completely lost in a mass of humanity that seemed to have forgotten children existed. Lucy had become separated from her father, David Thompson, during the chaotic rush toward the barrier. When Queen took the stage, in the excitement and press of bodies, the small girl had been swept away from her family's carefully planned spot and found herself trapped among the legs of strangers, unable to see the stage, unable to find her way back, and too small for anyone to notice her distress. Concert security guard James Mitchell later recalled noticing something unusual during Queen's third song. There was this sound cutting through the music, not loud, but persistent. It took me a while to realize it was a child crying, but in a crowd of 80,000 people, trying to locate one small voice was like finding a needle in a haystack. The irony was heartbreaking. Lucy's father, David, was frantically searching for his daughter while she stood just 50 feet away, invisible in the forest of adult bodies. He had already alerted security and was beginning to panic, fearing his little girl had been trampled in the crowd, or worse. Dr. Patricia Williams, a child psychologist who happened to be attending the concert, later analyzed what Lucy was experiencing. For a 5-year-old, being lost in that environment would have been absolutely terrifying. The sensory overload, the noise, the lights, the crushing bodies, combined with separation from her primary caregiver, would have created a perfect storm of psychological distress. Lucy's cries were becoming more desperate, but the wall of sound from Queen's performance and the crowd singing made her small voice nearly impossible to detect. She was calling for her daddy, but her words were being swallowed by the massive acoustic environment of Wembley Stadium. It was during the fourth song that something extraordinary happened. Queen had reached a brief instrumental break, one of those moments when the music drops to allow for crowd participation. In that split second of relative quiet, as 80,000 voices joined in unison, one tiny, terrified voice somehow cut through everything else. "Daddy, please, I'm lost." The words were barely audible to most of the crowd, but they reached the one person whose hearing was trained to detect individual voices in massive acoustic environments: Freddie Mercury himself. Sound engineer Robert Davis later revealed what happened in the monitoring system. Freddie's in-ear monitors picked up something that the main sound system almost missed. He stopped singing mid-verse and held up his hand to the band. I had never seen him do that before. Just stop a song completely for no apparent technical reason. As Queen's instruments fell silent one by one, 80,000 people gradually became aware that something unprecedented was happening. Their rock gods had simply stopped performing, and Freddie Mercury was scanning the crowd with an intensity that suggested he was searching for something specific. The stadium fell into an eerie quiet as fans realized their heroes weren't experiencing technical difficulties. They had chosen to stop. Freddie moved to the edge of the stage, his hand cupped over his ear, in the universal gesture of someone trying to locate a sound. "Did everyone hear that?" Freddie asked into his microphone, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent stadium. "Someone needs help. Someone very small needs our help." What happened next would create one of the most touching moments in concert history and prove that sometimes the biggest gestures come from paying attention to the smallest voices. As Freddie Mercury stood at the edge of Wembley Stadium's massive stage, 80,000 people found themselves participating in something completely unprecedented. A collective rescue mission led by by one of rock's biggest superstars. The concert had transformed from entertainment into a humanitarian effort, and everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. "There's a little girl lost in our crowd," Freddie announced, his voice carrying the same commanding presence he used for his biggest anthems, but now focused on a mission of compassion. "She's calling for her daddy, and we're going to help her find him, because that's what family does, and tonight we are all family." The response was immediate and overwhelming. 80,000 people began looking around them, searching for a small child in distress. Concert-goers started lifting each other up for better views, creating human periscopes throughout the stadium. The massive video screens, normally used to broadcast close-ups of the band, were redirected to scan the crowd for signs of the lost child. Dr. Michael Harrison, who was studying crowd behavior and happened to be present, later wrote about the remarkable transformation. "What we witnessed was the instant conversion of a rock concert into a massive search and rescue operation. 80,000 individuals became a single organism focused on finding one small person. It was unprecedented in crowd psychology." Lucy Thompson, still trapped in the forest of legs near the front barrier, heard Freddie's words through the speakers and felt a surge of hope. This famous person on the stage, the one everyone had come to see, was trying to help her. She began crying out again, but now with purpose, rather than just panic. I'm here, Daddy, I'm here." Security personnel throughout the stadium received instructions to focus entirely on locating the child. James Mitchell and his team began systematically working through sections of the crowd, while venue staff coordinated the search from multiple vantage points. But it was the crowd themselves who provided the breakthrough. Fans near Lucy began to notice the small voice coming from below them and started creating a protective circle around her. "She's here," someone shouted. "The little girl is here." The call was picked up and repeated, creating a human chain of communication that led directly back to the stage. David Thompson, Lucy's father, heard the commotion and fought his way through the crowd toward the source of the shouting. When he finally saw his daughter surrounded by a group of protective strangers who had formed a barrier around her, his relief was visible even to those watching from far away. Freddie, monitoring the situation from the stage, could see the movement in the crowd that indicated progress. "Have we found her?" he called out. And when the affirmative response came back through the human telephone chain, his smile was radiant. "Bring her up here," he commanded. "Bring both of them up here." What followed was a coordinated effort involving security, venue staff, and dozens of volunteers from the crowd who helped guide Lucy and her father toward the stage. The journey took several minutes, during which the entire stadium maintained supportive silence, watching the rescue unfold on the big screens. When Lucy finally emerged from the crowd, carried by a security guard with her father close behind, the roar of approval from 80,000 people was deafening. But Freddie wasn't finished with his act of compassion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced as father and daughter were reunited at the security barrier, "I want you to meet Lucy and her daddy, David. They've just reminded us all of something very important, that in a world full of noise, we must never stop listening for the voices that need us most." The crowd's response was emotional and sustained, but what Freddie did next would create a moment that Lucy Thompson would carry with her for the rest of her life. As Lucy Thompson stood at the security barrier, overwhelmed by the attention of 80,000 people but safely reunited with her father, Freddie Mercury made a decision that would transform this rescue into something magical. Instead of simply acknowledging the successful reunion and returning to the concert, he did something that defied every protocol of rock performance. He invited the 5-year-old girl onto the stage. "Lucy, darling," Freddie called out, kneeling at the edge of the stage to get closer to her eye level, "you've been very brave tonight. Would you like to come up here with us? I think these wonderful people would love to properly meet you." The invitation sent waves of excitement through the crowd, but Lucy, still overwhelmed by the experience, clung to her father's leg. David Thompson, a mild-mannered accountant who had never imagined he would be standing at the front of a Queen concert, found himself in the surreal position of being personally addressed by one of rock's biggest stars. "She's a bit shy," David called up to Freddie, his voice barely carrying over the ambient crowd noise. "This is all quite overwhelming for her." Freddie's response demonstrated why he was beloved, not just as a performer, but as a human being. Instead of pressuring the child or simply moving on, he climbed down from the stage entirely, something unprecedented in Queen's touring history, and approached Lucy at her level. Dr. Patricia Williams observed this interaction with professional fascination. explanation. What Freddy did was textbook child psychology. He made himself physically smaller, spoke in gentle tones, and gave Lucy complete control over the interaction. He understood intuitively how to communicate with a traumatized child. Kneeling beside the security barrier, Freddy spoke directly to Lucy in a voice soft enough that only she and her father could hear, though the wireless microphone system picked up fragments that reached the crowd. "Hello, little princess," he said gently. "You know what? You're the bravest person in this entire stadium. Do you know why?" Lucy, still tearful but curious, shook her head. Freddy continued, "Because you never gave up. You kept calling for your daddy, even when it seemed like no one could hear you. That's what brave people do. They never stop asking for help when they need it." What happened next created one of the most tender moments ever captured on concert video. Lucy, responding to Freddy's gentle manner, whispered something in his ear that made his face light up with genuine delight. Later interviews with lip readers revealed she had said, "Are you really famous? My daddy says you're the best singer in the world." Freddy's laughter was pure and joyful. "Well, your daddy is very smart," he replied. "But tonight, you're the most important person here. Would you like to help me sing a song for everyone? You don't have to sing loud. Just sing with me, and I promise everyone will listen." The crowd, which had been patiently watching this interaction, erupted in encouraging applause. When they realized Lucy was nodding agreement, security personnel helped both Lucy and her father onto the stage, where Queen's crew quickly provided small stools so they could be comfortable. Standing center stage at Wembley Stadium, 5-year-old Lucy Thompson found herself in the spotlight, with 80,000 people focused entirely on her. But instead of being frightening, Freddy's presence beside her made it feel safe, magical even. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddy announced, his arm protectively around Lucy's shoulders, "Lucy is going to help us with our next song, and I want everyone to sing along. Not for me, not for Queen, but for Lucy, who reminds us all that the most important voices are sometimes the smallest ones." What followed would be remembered as one of the most beautiful moments in rock concert history. Freddy chose a gentle ballad for their duet, something that would allow Lucy's small voice to be heard and wouldn't overwhelm her with complex musical arrangements. As the opening notes began, he knelt beside her, creating an intimate bubble of safety in the middle of the massive stadium spectacle. "Just sing the words you know, darling," he whispered to Lucy, "and if you don't know them, just hum along. Everyone here is singing with you, not at you." What emerged was unlike anything Queen had ever performed. Lucy's tiny voice, amplified through the stadium sound system, created a counterpoint to Freddy's powerful vocals that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She didn't know all the words, but her innocent humming and occasional clear phrases created something more moving than technical perfection ever could. The crowd's response was extraordinary. 80,000 people sang along with unprecedented gentleness, their voices creating a massive lullaby that embraced both performers on stage. Concert photographer Dennis O'Regan captured images showing tears streaming down faces throughout the stadium. Hardened rockers, teenagers, parents, and grandparents, all moved by the pure sweetness of the moment. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who was documenting the psychological effects of live music, later wrote, "What we witnessed was the transformation of a rock concert into something resembling a massive group hug. The collective energy was focused entirely on nurturing and protecting this one small person, creating an environment of safety and love that was palpable throughout the venue." As the song progressed, Lucy began to gain confidence. Her voice grew slightly stronger, and she started swaying to the music the way children do when they feel safe and happy. The crowd noticed this transformation and responded with gentle encouragement, not the wild screaming typical of rock concerts, but supportive applause that felt more like a family celebration. Brian May, watching from his position on stage, later described the moment. "I've played thousands of concerts, but I've never seen anything like the energy that night. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about this little girl and what she represented. She had turned 80,000 strangers into a community united by compassion." The most remarkable moment came when Lucy, overcome by the beauty of what was happening around her, spontaneously hugged Freddy mid-song. The crowd's response was so emotionally overwhelming that many people later reported it as a spiritual experience. As the song concluded, Freddy made one final gesture that cemented the evening's legacy. He removed one of his iconic rings, a simple silver band that he wore during every performance, and placed it on Lucy's tiny finger. "This is so you'll always remember," he told her, "that you're brave enough to be heard even in the biggest crowd." The standing standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 10 minutes. But more importantly, the incident created ripple effects that extended far beyond that single evening. Wembley Stadium implemented new protocols for helping lost children at large events. Directly inspired by Lucy's experience, the story spread through media worldwide, becoming a symbol of how individual compassion could transform mass experiences. Lucy Thompson, now an adult, still wears Freddie's ring and has devoted her career to child advocacy. She credits that evening with teaching her that her voice matters, no matter how small it might seem in a crowd. David Thompson later revealed that the concert changed his relationship with his daughter forever. Watching Freddie treat Lucy with such respect and attention taught me to listen differently to my own child. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when we stop everything else and just pay attention. The bootleg recordings of that evening became legendary among Queen fans, not for the musical performances, but for the reminder that the greatest moments in live music often happen when artists remember that their audience consists of individual human beings, each with their own story, each deserving of being heard. But the most profound change was in Freddie Mercury himself. That night at Wembley taught him something that would influence every subsequent performance and every interaction with fans for the rest of his career. Jim Beach, Queen's manager, noticed the immediate change in Freddie's approach to concerts. After the Lucy incident, Freddie started looking for individuals in the crowd. He understood that behind every face was a story, a struggle, a person who had come to that concert for reasons we might never understand. Mary Austin, Freddie's closest friend, observed how the experience affected him personally. Freddie always cared about people, but that night with Lucy showed him the real power of his position. He realized he could use his platform not just to entertain, but to heal, to connect, to make individuals feel seen and valued. The incident influenced Queen's songwriting as well. Their subsequent albums contained more themes about human connection, about listening to those who are often overlooked, about the responsibility that comes with having a voice that can reach millions. Roger Taylor recalled how Freddie would often reference the Lucy incident. When the band was writing new material, he'd say, "Remember that little girl at Wembley? We're not just making music for the front row or the critics. We're making it for the Lucy Thompsons of the world, the ones who need to feel heard." Brian May noted how Freddie's stage presence evolved after that night. He became more aware of the quiet moments, the spaces between songs where real connection could happen. He understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do on stage is stop performing and start being human. The psychological impact on Freddie was profound. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had witnessed the original incident, later interviewed him for her research on performer-audience relationships. "Freddie told me that finding Lucy in that crowd taught him that his real gift wasn't his voice or his showmanship. It was his ability to see the individual in the mass, to hear the one voice that needed to be heard." The Lucy Thompson incident created a movement within the music industry. Other performers began incorporating moments of genuine human connection into their shows, inspired by what they had witnessed at Wembley. Music venues worldwide began implementing Lucy protocols, systematic approaches for handling lost children and other emergencies that prioritized human compassion alongside security concerns. Child psychologists began studying the footage from that night, using it to understand how public figures could positively influence child development and trauma recovery through their responses to crisis situations. The incident also influenced music education programs. Teachers began using the story of Lucy and Freddie as an example of how music could be a tool for social good, for creating community, for ensuring that no voice goes unheard. Perhaps most significantly, the Lucy Thompson story became a touchstone for discussions about celebrity responsibility and the power of platform. Freddie Mercury had demonstrated that fame could be used not just for personal gain or entertainment, but as a force for immediate tangible good in individual lives. Lucy Thompson grew up carrying the memory of that night as a defining moment in her understanding of her own worth and voice. She pursued a career in social work, specializing in helping children who had experienced trauma or felt marginalized. In interviews years later, Lucy would always wear Freddie's ring and speak about how that single evening shaped her entire worldview. "Freddie taught me that being small doesn't mean being invisible," she would say. "He showed me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just listen, really listen, to the voices that others might miss." Lucy established the Heard Foundation, a nonprofit non-profit organization dedicated to ensuring that children's voices are amplified in situations where they might otherwise be overlooked. The foundation's motto, inspired by Freddie's words that night, is "Every voice matters, no matter how small." David Thompson, Lucy's father, became an advocate for family-friendly concert experiences and worked with venues to create better protocols for attending events with young children. He often spoke at music industry conferences about the responsibility of performers and venues to consider their youngest audience members. The ring that Freddie gave Lucy that night was eventually donated to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where it sits in a special exhibit about music's power to create human connection. The plaque beside it reads, "Sometimes the most important performance happens when the music stops and humanity takes center stage." Today, nearly 40 years later, the story of Lucy Thompson and Freddie Mercury continues to influence how we think about celebrity, responsibility, and the power of truly listening to those around us. Music therapy programs around the world use the Lucy Freddie story as an example of how artists can use their platform for healing and connection. The incident is studied in psychology courses as an example of how public figures can positively influence individual trauma recovery. Concert venues have adopted Wembley standards, protocols for handling lost children and other emergencies that prioritize compassion and individual care alongside crowd control and security concerns. The music industry itself has been influenced by the values that Freddie demonstrated that night. Artist development programs now include training on how to handle unexpected situations with grace and how to use their platform for positive social impact. But perhaps the most lasting impact is on how we understand the relationship between performer and audience. The Lucy Thompson incident proved that the most meaningful moments in live music often happen not during the planned performance, but in the spontaneous moments when artists remember that their audience consists of individual human beings, each with their own story, each deserving of being seen and heard. The story of 5-year-old Lucy Thompson getting lost in a crowd of 80,000 people and Freddie Mercury's response to her cries for help serves as a powerful reminder that true greatness is not measured in vocal range or stage presence, but in the willingness to stop everything for someone who needs help. That night at Wembley Stadium, Freddie Mercury taught 80,000 people, and eventually millions more, through the retelling of this story, that the most important voice in any crowd might be the smallest one, the one that's easiest to miss, the one that everyone else has overlooked. He showed that real power comes not from commanding attention, but from paying attention, especially to those who feel invisible or unheard. The lesson of Lucy and Freddie extends far beyond the music world. In our daily lives, in our workplaces, in our communities, there are always Lucys, people whose voices are small, who feel lost in the crowd, who need someone to stop what they're doing and really listen. Freddie Mercury's response to one lost child's cries became a masterclass in human compassion, a demonstration that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply notice when someone needs help and choose to act. As we face an increasingly noisy world where individual voices can easily be drowned out by the crowd, the story of Lucy Thompson serves as a reminder that each of us has the power to be like Freddie Mercury, to listen for the voices that others miss, to stop what we're doing when someone needs help, and to remember that behind every face in every crowd is a human being with their own story, their own struggles, and their own need to be heard. If this story moved you the way it moved those 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium, please hit that like button and share it with anyone who needs to remember that their voice matters, no matter how small it might seem. What's the most powerful act of listening you've ever witnessed? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of how music creates moments of pure human connection. Because sometimes the most important melody isn't the one being played on stage. It's the one that happens when we tune in to the voices around us and choose to listen with our hearts.